Welcome to Quarantine Cuisine. I'm Prudence Caskey. Now, a lot of us have bought a lot of beans here recently, and not everyone knows how to make them. So I've had a lot of requests to show how I make my bean soup. I start out with navy beans, and what I do is what my husband calls picking through them. So I pick through the beans to make sure that there are no rocks in them. Sometimes you'll find a rock or two. I have already picked through a bowl here that I'm going to put in my crock pot. Okay, so the first step is going to be to add your dry beans to a pressure cooker, which is what I've got here, or you can use a crock pot. A pressure cooker, the time is going to vary, but a crock pot is something I used long before I got my pressure cooker, and it works out great. The next thing you add are some diced onions. So you'll need to dice some onions up, and you can throw those in there. Now, if you don't have diced onions, because this is going to cook for a very long time, you can also use just dried onions. And then you also want to add some garlic powder just for flavoring, and I just throw a little bit of that in there. If you have garlic cloves, you can add garlic cloves to it as well. And we'll add the Cavenders later. Now, the next thing that I always add is a protein for flavoring, and what I use is bacon in pieces. So bacon in pieces is in the refrigerated section at the grocery store over by the bacon. And you can use gel bacon, or you can use salt pork, or you can use diced ham, whatever your flavor is, or you can use no protein to flavor it, whatever you would like. I have, in a pinch, when we really didn't have a lot of money, I just used bacon bits, like real bacon bits though, and threw those in there. But this is frozen. I separate it out and I put it in little baggies so I can throw all this in the crock pot or the pressure cooker in the morning before I go to work. Or it cooks a lot faster in the pressure cooker, so sometimes after I get home from work, you know, when we went to work, I would just throw this in, and it takes about an hour and a half in the pressure cooker, about 8 hours in the crock pot. So depending on what you're using, either 8 hours or so to about an hour and a half. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my fluid in here. So I use a carton of chicken broth, which is 32 ounces, 4 cups, and then I add 4 cups of water. Now, the reason I don't add 8 cups of chicken broth is I find it's a little salty when I do it like that. The next thing, of course you knew Cavenders was coming. So the next thing I do is I sprinkle, I grab my spoon real fast and stir that. Okay, so I sprinkle just enough Cavenders so that you can see it on top of the onions. And just to cover the water. I know it looks like a lot, but this is a big pot of beans. Now, we will cover up our beans. And we're going to select beans on here and do 30 minutes. And that should start automatically. So there it goes. This will cook for 30 minutes, and then I will stir it and it'll cook again. Now, if you're doing this at the house with a crock pot, you want to cook it on high for the first little bit. If you're going to be gone all day, so let's say you get to go to work, because that's cool. What you'll do is you'll set your crock pot on low or medium, just depending if you know your crock pot. I always did low on mine. But you'll set your crock pot on low or medium, and if you're able to come home at lunch, that's when I would add the carrots. And you'll see we're gonna add the carrots after an hour, and so we'll do the 30 minutes twice in the pressure cooker. Then the last 30 minutes, we'll add the carrots and let those cook. If you add the carrots now, you're gonna eat mushy, mushy, mushy carrots, and you don't want that. Nobody wants mushy carrots. Okay, so we have gone for our first hour in the pressure cooker, and this would equate to about 6 or 7 hours in the crock pot. So I'm gonna just take this off, and it's gonna be steamy, so I hope it doesn't make it to where you can't see too much. So just want to give you an idea of what we're looking at. You can see our onions are nicely cooked, our beans are cooked, we've got a creamy broth going, and that pork that we put in there is super separated, yummy. I can smell it. Man, I wish there was smell-o-vision. It's very good smelling. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna add our carrots. I have just some cut carrots. And I'm just gonna throw this in here. This has cooked already for an hour, so I do wanna stir it so that you can see what our broth is looking like. And we're gonna mix these carrots in here. This was just a bag of pre-cut carrots I got for this recipe. Now you can add baby carrots. I've done that in the past. And you can also chop your own carrots. It just depends on what kind of grocery shopping you do. If you grow your carrots, I'm super jealous. And you can add those to this as well. And again, this is your recipe, it's your soup, so you make it the way you want. If you don't want to add the carrots, you don't have to, but they are fabulous. So we're gonna put the carrots in and then cook this for another 30 minutes. Okay, so now we have our bean soup on warm in the pressure cooker. I'm gonna stir those carrots in there. They will be nicely cooked but not mushy. And so this is what our bean soup looks like. And we are going to make a pound of cornbread to go with this, because you gotta have cornbread with your beans. So beans and cornbread. Okay, so when we have our bean soup, I usually make a pound of cornbread to go with it. And what I do is I double a recipe, and this is just kind of a fancied up Jiffy cornbread mix. I'll show you how I do it. You could do the same thing from scratch with cornmeal, but I had some Jiffy cornbread mix that I had left over, so I've got one container in here, and I will end up dirtying 2 pieces of silverware to make this. So I'm gonna open both of the packages and pour those in there. Then what I like to do is take a fork and just break those clods up to get that a little more fine so that you don't have big chunks of cornmeal in there. Now, this is highly controversial, but this is how we make it in our family. And again, you don't have to do it like this, but I add a little bit of sugar, not much. A lot of people say Jiffy is too sweet for them, but I do add a dash of sugar. And again, this is a doubled recipe. So I mix that sugar in there, and then I take the eggs, because I need 2 of them, and I just whisk those a tiny bit just to get them to where they'll incorporate in there. Then I add the 2/3 of a cup of milk, again because we're doubling, and I'll mix that up together. Now, if you're strictly following the recipe, you would omit the sugar and you would be ready for your pan, but that is not how I make my cornbread. So the other thing that I do is now I also add a can of creamed corn. And so it makes it really, really moist when you've got it cooking, and in the oven it makes it really, really moist. And it's almost like a corn cake. And so I stir that, get it all incorporated, and now I have a preheated oven. The recipe calls for 400 degrees, but I cook mine at 350, and I do that because it's a lot thicker. Okay, so I'm gonna show you how I pan up my cornbread. Now I've got the oven preheated to 350 degrees, and I've got my cast iron skillet also preheated to 250 degrees. Now what I did was I put just a tiny bit of oil in the cast iron skillet, and I'm gonna pour that, since it's hot, into my mix. And I'm just gonna stir that, incorporate it into my mix. This helps it not stick to my skillet, and then I'm just gonna pour that right back into the skillet. I have switched from my fork now to a large spoon to be able to scrape the sides of this pan. Now, because this is heavy, I'm gonna use 2 pot holders. And I'm gonna put that right back in the oven at 350 degrees. Again, the recipe on the box says 400, but since I've doubled it, I reduced the heat a little bit so that it cooks all the way through and without burning. We put our cornbread in for 20 minutes, and it is nice and golden brown, and we will put some butter on that and serve it with some bean soup. You can see this is really moist, and this is how I eat mine. Is I just throw a chunk of cornbread in the bowl. And then I'm gonna add to that some bean soup. And there we have it. Now I'm gonna let that cool just a second, and I'm gonna let you know how it tastes. So we've got our bean soup mixed up with the cornbread. I like to mix it up. And so I've got some beans and carrots and cornbread here, and I'm gonna just give it a taste. It's so good. I make my lima beans the same way, as well as my field peas. I've not tried this recipe on black beans yet, but I might give that a try and see how it turns out. I'll let y'all know. Thanks for watching Quarantine Cuisine. I appreciate y'all, and everybody be safe.